After 26 years mentoring their legal team, I was told I was too ethical for aggressive growth and shown the door. The phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. "Mac, they're here," whispered Sarah from legal. "FBI, they're walking through the lobby right now." I set down my coffee and smiled for the first time in months. 26 years of building Vermont Technology's legal foundation, and it all came down to this moment. Through my apartment window, I could see the news vans already gathering in the company parking lot, their satellite dishes gleaming like mechanical flowers under the streetlights. But how I got here is the real story. My name is Mac Millers. I joined Vermont Technologies when it was just 12 employees in a converted warehouse that still smelled like the auto parts business that had occupied it before. Fresh out of law school, idealistic, ready to change the world through innovation. The company was different then, scrappy, ethical, built on the premise that technology should serve humanity, not exploit it. Our first office Christmas party was potluck style, and everyone knew everyone's kids' names. For over 2 decades, I mentored every lawyer who walked through our doors. Jenny Rodriguez, who started as a paralegal and became our IP expert. David Kim, who could dissect a contract like a surgeon. Alex Thompson, who left us to become a federal judge. I taught them that compliance wasn't just about avoiding lawsuits. It was about building trust. I showed them how to navigate gray areas without compromising integrity. We became known industry-wide as the company that did things right. My mentorship philosophy was simple. Teach the why, not just the what. Anyone can read a regulation, I'd tell the new hires during our weekly training sessions, but understanding why that regulation exists, what harm it prevents, that's what separates good lawyers from great ones. I kept a photo from those early days on my desk. Our first legal team retreat. 5 attorneys sitting around a conference table made from sawhorses and plywood, all of us grinning like we owned the world. I watched Vermont Technologies grow from startup to Fortune 500. I celebrated every milestone, every breakthrough, every ethical victory. The IPO in 2019, where we were praised for our transparent practices. The industry awards for corporate responsibility. The congressional testimony I gave on behalf of ethical AI development. The legal team I built was bulletproof, not because we were aggressive, but because we were thorough. We dotted every I, crossed every T. Boring, maybe. But we slept well at night. My office walls were covered with awards, not just for legal excellence, but for corporate responsibility. Vermont Tech, where innovation meets integrity, read our old motto. I'd written that slogan myself back when words still meant something to leadership, back when the founders still remembered their initial mission statement, which I'd helped draft in 2011. To create technology that enhances human potential while respecting human dignity. But companies change. Leadership changes. The original founders sold their shares in 2022, cashing out to venture capital firms with very different priorities. Values. Well, values are apparently more flexible than I thought. The old guard was systematically replaced with MBA types, who spoke in buzzwords and measured everything in quarterly metrics. "Mac, we need to talk." CEO Bradley Chen's voice carried that particular tone I'd learned to dread over the past year. The same tone he used when explaining why environmental regulations were suggestions and why user privacy was outdated. Thinking. The same tone that had preceded the departures of every other senior executive who dared question the new direction. His corner office had been redecorated. Gone were the family photos and company history displays, replaced by abstract art that probably cost more than most employees' annual salaries. The conference table where we'd once held collaborative strategy sessions had been removed, replaced by uncomfortable metal chairs clearly designed to keep meetings short. Bradley sat behind his glass desk, fingers steepled like he was delivering a medical diagnosis. "After careful consideration, we've decided to restructure the legal department," he began. I almost laughed. 26 years and he couldn't even look me in the eye. Instead, he stared at his laptop screen, reading from what was obviously a prepared script. "You're firing me," I said flatly. "Transitioning. We're transitioning toward a more aggressive growth strategy. Your approach, while admirable, is perhaps too ethical for what we need to accomplish in today's market." His words hung in the air like smoke. "The board feels that someone with your philosophy might struggle with the pivots we need to make." Too ethical. The phrase tasted bitter. "Bradley, I built this legal department from nothing. So I've saved this company millions in litigation costs, regulatory fines, and that's exactly the problem." He leaned forward, suddenly animated, the script forgotten. "While you were playing defense, our competitors were scoring touchdowns. We've been the tortoise in a world that rewards the hare, Mac. The market doesn't care about our ethics awards." I thought about the young Bradley I'd first met 8 years ago, fresh from Harvard Business School, full of respect for the company, culture, and eager to learn from senior leadership. That Bradley had asked thoughtful questions about balancing growth with responsibility. This Bradley spoke only in sports metaphors and market dynamics. "We'll take risks now, Mac. Real risks. The kind that generate real returns." He actually laughed, a sharp hollow sound that echoed off his glass walls. "Pike has already identified 17 regulatory bottlenecks we can eliminate. 17. You've been holding us back for years." I said nothing. Sometimes silence speaks louder than arguments, but inside I was calculating. 17 bottlenecks meant 17 safeguards my team had put in place to protect consumers, employees, and the environment. 17 barriers. Between Vermont Technologies and potential catastrophe, the severance package was generous. Too generous. That should have been my first clue. 6 months' salary, extended health benefits, and a non-disclosure agreement so comprehensive it could have classified as a novella. They wanted me gone quickly, quietly, with no questions asked. But after 26 years, you don't just walk away. You watch. You listen. You connect dots. Sarah Martinez, my former protégé, started sending me cryptic messages, coffee shop meetings that felt like scenes from a spy thriller, parking garage conversations where we spoke in code about hypothetical situations. She was scared, genuinely terrified of what Vermont Technologies was becoming under Bradley's aggressive growth strategy. "They're cutting corners on everything," she whispered over lukewarm coffee at a diner 3 towns over, her hands trembling slightly as she stirred artificial sweetener into her cup. "Environmental impact assessments? Gone. Data privacy audits? Too expensive. They're pushing products to market without proper testing, Mac. People could get hurt." The technical details she shared made my blood run cold. Their new smart home. Devices were collecting far more user data than disclosed. Location tracking that continued even when disabled. Audio recordings from supposedly inactive microphones. Behavioral pattern analysis that bordered on psychological profiling. Their manufacturing processes were dumping chemicals that hadn't been properly tested, claiming exemptions that didn't exist. Their employee monitoring software was borderline illegal, tracking bathroom breaks and personal conversations. But the worst part? They were using my legal framework, the one I'd spent decades building, to justify it all. They'd twisted my careful precedents into loopholes, my protective measures into weapons. Risk assessments I'd created to prevent harm were being repurposed, to calculate acceptable damage levels. "What about the compliance team?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Sarah's laugh was bitter. "What team?" Bradley fired anyone who asked questions. Lisa from environmental gone, Roberto from data protection, transferred to some meaningless role in IT. The new lawyers aren't lawyers, they're enablers. They compete to see who can find the most creative interpretation of regulations. She pulled out her phone, showing me LinkedIn profiles of the new hires. Recent graduates from third-tier law schools, all with histories at companies that had faced major regulatory actions. Pike was building a team of yes-men, lawyers who specialized in finding gray areas and calling them green lights. I realized then that this wasn't just about aggressive growth. This was about dismantling everything I'd built, everything I'd stood for. They weren't just betraying me. They were betraying every principle Vermont Technologies had once represented. Every employee who trusted the company culture, every customer who believed in our integrity, every investor who'd bought into our ethical brand. I wasn't alone in my concerns. Marcus Webb, former head of environmental safety, had been restructured out 3 months before me after questioning the new chemical disposal protocols. Jennifer Liu from compliance had been downsized shortly after raising concerns about data retention policies. Dr. Elena Vasquez from product safety had been forced into early retirement when she refused to sign off on accelerated testing schedules. We started meeting regularly, 4 professionals who dedicated our careers to doing things right, watching our life's work crumble in real time. They can't do this forever, Jennifer insisted during one of our coffee shop conspiracies, her former optimism now tinged with desperation. Someone will notice. Regulators, investors, somebody. But Marcus shook his head gravely. You don't understand how deep this goes. Bradley's convinced the board that rapid expansion justifies any risk. They've got lawyers now who specialize in regulatory capture. They're not trying to comply with laws, they're trying to rewrite them. He showed us documents he'd managed to salvage from his old files, evidence of systematic safety protocol violations that would have shut down manufacturing operations at any responsible company. Dr. Vasquez, normally reserved, was visibly angry. 23 years I spent building those safety protocols. 23 years of careful research, incremental improvements, always erring on the side of caution. They've undone it all in 6 months. Her voice cracked with frustration. The new testing schedule for consumer electronics? It's designed to find obvious flaws, not subtle long-term risks. They're essentially using consumers as beta testers. The new legal team was led by Harrison Pike, a corporate shark I'd tangled with at other companies. Pike didn't believe in ethics. He believed in billable hours and legal technicalities. Where I'd built bridges with regulators, fostering relationships, based on mutual respect and transparency, he was building walls. Where I'd fostered transparency, he was creating opacity. His reputation preceded him. 3 companies, 3 major regulatory settlements, 3 exits just before the consequences hit. I tried reaching out to board members I'd known for years, people who'd once praised my work and sought my counsel on sensitive matters. Some wouldn't take my calls. Others gave me polite brush-offs about trusting new leadership and respecting management decisions. Only Margaret Torres, the longest-serving board member and someone I'd considered a friend, would meet with me. "Mac, I hear your concerns," she said over lunch at her exclusive club, her voice careful and measured. "But Bradley's delivering results. Stock price is up 40% since you left. The quarterly reports show unprecedented growth. The market is responding positively to our new direction." "At what cost?" I asked, leaning forward earnestly. "Margaret, you've known me for 15 years. Have I ever steered this company wrong? Have I ever raised concerns that didn't prove justified?" Her pause told me everything. Even she was choosing profits over principles. The woman who'd once championed corporate responsibility initiatives was now measuring success solely in stock prices and revenue growth. The confrontation with Pike was inevitable. I cornered him at an industry conference, pulled him aside between sessions while he was schmoozing with potential clients. "Harrison, I know what you're doing at Vermont Tech. This won't end well." His smile was predatory, all teeth and no warmth. "Mac Miller's, still fighting yesterday's battles, I see. The world's changed, old man. Companies that can't adapt get left behind. You represent everything that's wrong with corporate law. Too much concern for hypothetical risks, not enough focus on actual results. And companies that break laws get shut down. Only if they get caught. And only if what they're doing is actually illegal." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your problem, Mac, is you never learned the difference between illegal and inadvisable, between prohibited and discouraged. I operate in the spaces you were too scared to explore." His words haunted me for weeks. He was right about one thing. I had always erred on the side of caution. But I'd seen what happened when companies pushed too far, too fast. I'd cleaned up the messes, defended the lawsuits, counted the casualties. Pike was gambling with other people's lives and calling it business strategy. The pressure campaign began subtly. Former colleagues stopped returning calls. Industry contacts grew distant. Someone was spreading word that I was disgruntled, bitter about being terminated, not to be trusted with sensitive information. The whisper campaign was surgical in its precision, Just enough doubt to make people hesitant without being so obvious as to generate sympathy. My consulting work dried up overnight. Clients who'd courted me for months suddenly had budget constraints or decided to go in a different direction. One potential client, a startup in the renewable energy sector, was brutally honest. "Mac, we'd love to work with you, but we're hearing things. Questions about your judgment, your ability to work with modern compliance standards. We can't take that risk. It was professional blacklisting, executed with surgical precision. Pike's network was extensive, and he was using every connection to poison the well. Law firms that had tried to recruit me suddenly weren't interested. Speaking engagements I'd been invited to were mysteriously cancelled. Even my membership in the Corporate Counsel Association came under review after concerns were raised about my professional conduct. Sarah's situation at Vermont Technologies was deteriorating rapidly. Pike was making her life miserable, impossible. Deadlines, unreasonable demands, constant criticism delivered in front of colleagues. She was one of the best lawyers I'd ever trained, brilliant and dedicated, but he was systematically undermining her confidence. "I can't take much more of this," she confessed during one of our increasingly rare meetings, held now in a parking garage 30 miles from the office. "Yesterday, he assigned me to review a 1,000-page environmental compliance manual by end of day, knowing I had a deposition scheduled. When I asked for more time, he said I was displaying the same lack of initiative that infected the previous management." But she couldn't quit. She needed the job to support her elderly mothers, medical care. And honestly, she was scared of what they'd do if she left. They're paranoid about information leaking, Mac. Really paranoid. They've installed keystroke monitoring software on all legal department computers. They're tracking our emails, our phone calls, even our bathroom breaks. I feel like I'm working for the Stasi. The technical violations were mounting. I had documentation, thanks to Sarah and a few other allies still inside, of at least a dozen clear regulatory breaches. Environmental violations that could result in millions in fines, privacy breaches that affected hundreds of thousands of consumers, safety shortcuts that put users at risk. But documentation wasn't enough without someone willing to act on it. Tried reaching out to regulatory agencies directly. The EPA was investigating, but wouldn't provide timelines. The FTC was reviewing complaints, but offered no concrete action. The State Attorney General's office was looking into the matter, with bureaucratic indifference. Each agency seemed to assume another was taking the lead, resulting in a bureaucratic shell game where real action was always someone else's responsibility. Meanwhile, Vermont Technologies was growing more aggressive. They acquired 3 smaller companies in 2 months, immediately implementing their streamlined compliance approach. More corners cut, more risks taken, more potential victims created. Each acquisition brought new technologies, new markets, and new opportunities for catastrophic failure. The breaking point came when Sarah called me in tears. They're launching the new home security system next month, the one with the privacy issues we discussed. I tried to raise concerns in the product review meeting, and Pike accused me of corporate sabotage. In front of everyone, Mac. He said people like me were why American companies couldn't compete globally. She was trembling when we met that evening. "There's more. The system has a backdoor, supposedly for law enforcement access, but it's not properly secured. Any competent hacker could access the cameras and microphones of every system they sell. We're talking about potentially millions of homes with compromised security." I realized then that incremental approaches wouldn't work. Bradley and Pike were protected by corporate structure, board support, and financial success. They'd calculated that the benefits of breaking rules outweighed the risks of getting caught. They were gambling with public safety and calling it innovation. They'd made one critical error in their calculations. They'd forgotten who taught them how to play the game in the first place. The revelation came from an unexpected source, Tommy Chen, Bradley's nephew and a junior software engineer. He reached out through encrypted messaging, terrified but determined. "Uncle Brad doesn't know I'm contacting you," he typed, "but I've been following the news about regulatory investigations. There's something you need to know." What Tommy shared was explosive. Vermont Technologies wasn't just cutting regulatory corners, They were actively hiding violations. Pike had created a parallel documentation system, sanitized versions of reports for regulatory review, while keeping the real data buried in encrypted servers. More damaging, they had advance warning about several investigations someone was feeding them information from inside regulatory agencies, allowing them to clean up evidence before inspections. "There's a server room in the basement," Tommy explained during our clandestine meeting in a 24-hour diner. "Locked access, biometric security. Pike calls it the insurance files. I managed to copy some directory listings before they changed my access level." The files Tommy had accessed were damning: communications between Pike and regulatory contacts, modified test results, financial projections that explicitly factored in regulatory fine costs as business expenses. But I needed more than directory listings. I needed actual evidence, documented proof that would hold up in court. And I needed it before Vermont Technology's next product launch potentially harmed thousands of consumers. "There's something else," Tommy said as we prepared to leave. "Uncle Brad is paranoid about you. Really paranoid. He's convinced you're planning something. Pike has people monitoring your communications, your meetings. They know about Sarah helping you." The game had changed. This wasn't just about corporate ethics anymore. It was about protecting the people I cared about and preventing genuine harm to consumers who trusted Vermont Technology's reputation. I had one advantage they'd forgotten about. I'd designed their legal and compliance systems. I knew every vulnerability, every backdoor, every pressure point. I'd built those systems to be ethical, but they could be repurposed for justice. The plan required precise timing and absolute trust. Sarah would submit her resignation on Friday afternoon, triggering Pike's predictable weekend security review, a window when system monitoring would be focused externally rather than internally. Meanwhile, I'd coordinate with investigative journalist Maria Santos, who'd been tracking corporate malfeasance for the Washington Post. Maria had the platform and credibility to make the story impossible to ignore, but she needed ironclad documentation to publish. Tommy's role was the most dangerous. He'd use his remaining system access to download the insurance files during the security window. One chance, minimal time, maximum risk. Friday at 5:30 p.m., Sarah walked into Pike's office with her resignation letter. As predicted, he flew into a rage, immediately calling security to review all her recent system access. By 6 p.m., their IT team was conducting a full audit of her activities. At 6:15 p.m., while security focused on Sarah's digital trail, Tommy accessed the basement server room. 18 minutes later, he emerged with a USB drive containing 3 years of hidden documentation. "It's worse than we thought," he said, when we met at the predetermined location. "They've been systematically violating regulations since the day you left. Environmental, privacy, safety, everything you warned them about." The files were devastating. Pike's communications revealed a calculated strategy of regulatory capture and evidence manipulation. Bradley's emails showed he was fully aware of the violations, but considered them acceptable risks for growth targets. Most damning, internal projections that explicitly budgeted for regulatory fines while calculating the profit margins from non-compliance. They weren't accidentally breaking laws. They were doing it because it was profitable. Maria worked through the weekend, verifying documents, cross-referencing sources, building an airtight case. Her article would publish Monday morning, but I had one more move to make. Sunday night, I sent a comprehensive evidence package to every relevant regulatory agency simultaneously: EPA, FTC, State Attorney General, SEC. Not through official channels. That could be intercepted or delayed, but directly to investigators I'd worked with over the years. People who understood the urgency. The Washington Post article hit like a thunderclap Monday morning. Vermont Technologies, how an ethics-driven company became a regulatory rogue. Maria's piece was thorough, devastating, and impossible to dismiss. By noon, federal investigators were walking through Vermont Technologies' lobby. The FBI raid that evening was almost anticlimactic. The real damage had already been done through regulatory shutdown orders and investor panic. Bradley's phone call came at 11:47 p.m., just as Sarah had warned it would. When he spoke, his voice cracked. The arrogant confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. Mac, we need to talk. I think we may have made some mistakes. Can you help us navigate this? I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I'm retired, Bradley, remember? Too ethical for aggressive growth. I hung up before he could respond. Sarah landed a position with the Attorney General's office, leading the prosecution team against Vermont Technologies. Tommy received whistleblower protection and a job offer from 3 competing firms. Even Margaret Torres called to apologize and offer consulting work. As for me, I started a new practice specializing in corporate ethics and regulatory compliance. The phone hasn't stopped ringing. Apparently there's still a market for doing things right. Vermont Technologies survived barely. After paying $340 million in fines and settlements, Bradley was forced out. Pike was disbarred. The company's new motto, ironically, is almost identical to our old one: innovation with integrity. Some battles take 26 years to win. Some victories are worth the wait. I sleep well at night now. Finally.